Peterborough-Kawartha is a picturesque riding just northeast of the city of Toronto. It encompasses both the city of Peterborough and the well-known Kawartha Lakes Cottage District, where so many look to get away from the stresses of big city life. You might find the pace here is slower, the voters older. In fact, 1/5 of the residents here are retirees over the age of 65. They're mostly white and with modest incomes. Peterborough-Kawartha is also one of 30 brand new ridings added or redistributed since the last federal election. And it's also right in the middle of vote-rich Ontario, a province that has always been a key battleground for voter support because of the sheer number of seats available to be won here. Until recently, one of those seats belonged to former Conservative MP Dean Del Mastro. He won this riding handily in 2011, getting almost 50% of the popular vote. But he resigned last November after being convicted of overspending in the 2008 election. This past June, he was sentenced to a month in prison for breaking his election spending limit and filing a false report.
If that was a regular criminal, they'd be in jail. Period.
He did go to jail at least one day.
Yeah, one day. Come on. I mean, if that was, like I said, a regular person, you'd get 6 months or something, right? A one-day thing, basically, that's a slap in the wrist.
He went to jail for an evening, and the implications of that are far-reaching in this riding. People are, we had letters to the editor flooding into our newspaper. It was the talk of the town. It was just about all anybody could talk about for days, months. It went on for a year in this trial. I mean, everyone in Peterborough has an opinion about it one way or another.
Many speculate it was pressure from the Prime Minister's office that forced Del Mastro, a former parliamentary secretary to the PM, to initially resign from the Conservative caucus. Del Mastro still sat as an independent, though, for months after being charged back in 2013.
Those that are keep me in their thoughts and prayers, I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Are you nervous about today?
No, not at all. No,
Do you think it's going to happen?
It's just another step.
Do you think you'll be put to jail today and you'll get bailed possibly?
I'm prepared to do whatever's necessary to stand for the truth. Thank you.
Del Mastro was formally convicted in November of 2014, barred from running for federal office for the next 5 years. Local businessman Michael Skinner is now running in his place.
You know, it's interesting. When I decided to run, obviously it was after the situation with Dean happened, and so I wasn't sure how the people would take that. You know, I've been basically just over 5,000 doors. People are really worried about their future, and that's what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing about Dean. What I'm hearing about is, you know, hydro prices is a huge thing that I'm hearing about. Obviously, they're a provincial more than a federal issue, but I'm definitely hearing about that because it does affect everybody. I'm hearing about healthcare as well. We've got an aging population in Peterborough, and healthcare is very, very important. And like I said, I'm hearing about jobs in our economy. And I'm also hearing about the perception of our community. You know, sometimes people don't know everything that's happening in our community, and it's important to keep elevating that and make sure that all the great success stories that we have, that we continue to tell.
You haven't come across any Conservative supporters who've said, you know, this time around, because of the Dean Del Mastro affair, I have lost trust and I'm not going to...
Not at the door, I haven't. And, you know, like I said, I had expected to hear that for sure. I think all of us had, but I'm not. You know, I'm hearing people are I think people are happy with what Stephen Harper has done. You know, we've increased the jobs by 1.3 million since 2009. The biggest thing is people want stability in their life. I had a meeting last night with a number of our ag community, so I met actually with Jamie Schmiel and Adam Moulton, which are the two other candidates which are adjacent to us. And we met with a number of our ag leaders, which have property that crosses over our borders, and the whole idea was to really approach things with a teamwork point of view. The number one thing they heard from the agriculture is stability, stability, and stability. So they want to make sure that we've got stability, they want consistency in what we have. And I think the only way to do that is to maintain the Conservative government and to maintain the same flow. As soon as you bring in any kind of different government, you get a lot of changes. Changes take away from stability.
Let me ask you this, because we talked to some people in the riding, and there was, at least from some, a sense of disappointment that this riding didn't have representation after Mr. Dean Del Mastro decided to step aside, and then after the conviction as well. And they were frustrated by that. They seemed to feel that, you know, interests were being put before their own, party interests were being put before their own. Any sense of that? And how would you remedy that?
You know, the biggest thing I think people had to realize, and we're still educating people today, is the riding changes has been huge. You know, like I said earlier, about a third of the physical space has changed. When I was up in Apsley on Monday, talking to people, they still thought that the Barry DeVolen would be their future MP. Obviously, Barry's been a great Conservative MP, but he's stepping down, and so Jamie is filling that role. But they're now in the Peterborough riding, and so even when we did our nomination, we had a lot of people, not a lot of people. We had a lot of our supporters though that came thinking that they would be voting for us, and they were coming out of Norwood or Tonabee South Monaghan, which has always been attached to Peterborough. And so I think it's really, really important to make sure that was communicated. Like you said, it's been a long election, but for me, I've been taking advantage of making sure that people understand, and we're still educating people even on Monday. So we've got about 45 more days for me to go out there and make sure that everybody understands the new riding changes. They understand who I am. Of the three candidates, I'm probably the least known. Both candidates, Dave Nicol has run 7 times, I believe, and so
are you worried about that because he is a veteran, and also your Liberal challenger as well, almost won mayor in Peterborough?
Yeah, well, I think for me, my biggest thing is to get out there, and you're going to hear me. I mean, we're canvassing. I'm going to meeting as many people as possible.
I think the Conservatives still have an extremely strong support base in the county of Peterborough, if not. And they do in the city as well, but also I think particularly it's strong in the county. It's very interesting, isn't it, that despite a trial, despite so much media coverage of what's happened here in Peterborough, there still seems to be that support to an extent, that's for sure.
Some voters here are just happy that after almost a year without any representation in Ottawa, they'll finally have their say. The Dean Del Mastro affair, though, does that change things here?
I think people are a little bit angry about being not represented for about half the term and no election being called.
What happened?
Dean resigned because, well, first of all, he was out of caucus because Mr. Harper threw him out, and then he was supposed to be representing the interests. I think it was for integrity issues, and he was thrown out on an integrity issue. So.
But why no by-election? It's all coming down to the
The Prime Minister would be the person to ask about that.
But there's anger about that?
I think so. I think people feel a little bit embarrassed about having no representative and what went on, and certainly you feel you should be represented in Parliament.
How much will that matter on election day?
Well, hopefully it should matter. Hopefully that people will get out and show their displeasure for being underrepresented or non-represented. So having the Speaker of the House as your representative isn't exactly what people are looking for.
So this man says he'll be voting Liberal, voting for candidate Miriam Monsef.
You were almost mayor.
I was almost mayor. If 1% more had voted, I would have been mayor. And I'm also engaged in my community. I like being out and about. I like connecting with people and learning about their stories and their concerns.
Everyone's very open to change. I like that it's not too stagnant. Everyone's in, because you've got the universities and the college too.
If the Dean Del Mastro affair has done damage, Monsef says her goal is to bring back the trust, hoping to inspire through her own personal success story.
My mom, a single mom with 3 daughters, came to this country as a refugee from Afghanistan, hoping that her daughters would achieve the opportunities that she wasn't able to pursue in Afghanistan. And we came here to Peterborough about 20 years ago, and this community welcomed us with open arms, and the services and the organizations here did their best to make us feel welcome and like we belong here. And here I am, nearly 20 years later, a success story of what this community and what Canada does best.
Monsef says Peterborough needs to move past Dean Del Mastro and look to its new future.
This is a great country, and this is a welcoming community. And someone like me, given the opportunities that I have been given here, working hard and having a desire to make this community a better place, I'm not the only such story in this community. I'm just part of the culture.
People in the streets that you meet, people that support you, why do they want you to win? What is it that you can bring to Ottawa? What can you bring to this community specifically?
Because they're ready for real change. They're ready for the kind of leadership that listens to their needs, that's in touch with their realities. They're looking forward to the kind of leadership that is collaborative, that is compassionate, and takes into account the reality that right now, parents don't get to see their kids and their grandkids grow up here because those kids and grandkids won't find social and economic opportunities here. And I'm committed to being a positive agent and changing that.
What do you mean by that?
We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, despite the fact that we have so many assets like Trent University, Fleming College, the Trent Severn Waterway, a generous community, proximity to larger markets like the GTA.
So it's jobs and the economy still the top issue here?
People's livelihoods, yes. Do they see a future for themselves here? Do they see a future for their kids here?
So almost a decade of conservative rule, and people are telling you in this community what's happened. Have their lives improved?
Not for most. Not for most. Many are suffering. 57% of people in Peterborough County are earning below a living wage, and our workforce is shrinking. That needs to change.
Are you seeing jobs being created here? Are large corporations investing in this community in any way? Because many would say that's been the main conservative plank and platform. Has that failed? And how would a Liberal representative such as yourself and a Liberal government change that?
There are businesses invested here. And those who are invested here are heavily invested, not just in providing people with a paycheck, but they get involved in the social fabric of our community and our philanthropists in the process. And once people come here and establish their businesses, for the most part, they appreciate the quality of life our community offers, and they want to stay. The Conservatives' approach to managing the economy has failed. The recent numbers from Statistics Canada confirm their failure to manage our economy. Their record is abysmal. We've put all our economic eggs into the resource extraction sector, and we've lost sight of the many other important sectors, like manufacturing in our community, that play a vital part in not just our history, but in our livelihoods today. It's short-sighted.
How many manufacturing jobs have disappeared from this community, and has it happened over the last decade?
Let's put it this way. GE, just up the road, used to employ tens of thousands of people in this community. It was a pivotal reason that Trent University was founded right here in Peterborough. Today, there are about 650 people working at GE.
So under a Liberal government, $125 billion in infrastructure spending, that's a huge amount of money, and some people are saying it's potentially, a dangerous gamble, because if the economy improves, do we really need that much money infused into the economy?
We're in a recession, and different economic situations call for different measures. If the economy was growing and operating well, you're right, that kind of an investment may not be the best thing to do. But right now, we're headed into a recession, and the Conservative approach, supported by the NDP, to cut spending and move towards austerity, all in the name of a balanced budget, history has taught us that that is the beginning of a vicious cycle, and the Great Depression reminds us of where that can end. The alternative is to stimulate and invest in the economy and create jobs, and the growth that will incur will allow us to pay down any short-term deficits. That's the responsible public policy approach.
It's been almost a decade of conservative rule federally, though, so why aren't the jobs here, and what needs to be done to create more, and why should, a voter choose a conservative candidate versus a Liberal or NDP candidate, because they're saying the jobs aren't here, and
I think
the conservative plan does not work.
That's a great question to ask. The biggest thing for me, obviously, is we do have great companies that are here. Our region's got some great things. One of the things that when I put the strategic plan together for Peterborough Economic Development was really what we call tell our story. And it's really getting out there and telling what the story of the Peterborough region is. We've had a lot of business expansion over the years.
How many jobs, would you say,
are in the city of Peterborough?
have been added?
That's a great question. I do not know that statistic.
How many jobs can you add?
Well, that's also a great question. For me, it's just about working hard and trying to get as many jobs as possible. Yeah. It's really, really important that we focus on our local businesses. I think it's important that we continue to keep the tax base low, as the Conservative Party has. We've dropped the taxes from 21% down to 11%. We're going to go to 9%. That's important. It's important to make sure that money gets invested back into the community, and the easiest way to do that is that the companies that are producing that profit get to keep it and invest it back into job creation. Advanced manufacturing has been part of our society. We used to be very well known for purely manufacturing. What we've seen really is advanced manufacturing. We were just out at Savage Arms today, which they're of course doing some great things, and it's important to continue doing that. They've just invested a number of quite a bit of money in automation, and I think there's $1.4 billion that our Conservative government's put into advanced manufacturing. They did receive some of that money here locally, and it's increasing their output. Increasing their output lets them obviously hire more people.
But Canada is in a technical recession. How big of a challenge is that for you when it's been a Conservative government that's been presiding, as we say, for almost a decade now?
I think the big thing for me is, you got to remember, is I came from business, and so I grew my company basically while the Conservative Party has been in power. I grew my company, like I said, into Brazil, into Australia, and into China, and so we need to continue growing that. I think keeping a tax base low is very, very important. I think, as you said, it's a technical recession. For me, it's about jobs. You know, I'm not hearing that we've lost any jobs in the country. We're hearing is that there's a technical recession. And so for me, I think we need to stay the same course that we've been on so far. We need to keep investing in companies. We need to continue investing in families. And most importantly, we need to make sure that we are opening up global markets so that the great, smart people that we have, both in this region as well as nationally, can continue to grow and expand globally.
Now, this riding's long been considered a classic bellwether, meaning it's a pretty good indicator of how the rest of the country might vote. And for decades, voters here have swung back and forth, choosing either Liberals or Conservatives. Now, last election, the Conservatives won, with the NDP and Liberals virtually tied for second place. This time around, the vote may show something else, and that's whether scandals like the Dean Del Mastro case and ongoing Mike Duffy trial have done any real damage to Stephen Harper's Conservatives.
Both the NDP and Liberals see huge opportunity here.
Hey, everyone! What an evening, what a crowd. Thank you so much, Peterborough, for this incredible welcome.
When Justin Trudeau came to town not too long ago, 800 people packed a community center overnight. This was announced that it was going to happen, and it was like a rock star reception. Meanwhile, the NDP candidate, this is his 6th time running a campaign. He's run provincially and federally. He's got huge support as well. They're all talking the champion talk. You know, and I think they all have a very good chance. I would never want to try and call it at this point.
Federal NDP leader Thomas Mulcair was also in town backing his local candidate, retired teacher Dave Nicol. You came second in this riding in 2011.
Yep.
Are your chances pretty good this time around? What's your sense? Having conversations with voters and people in the riding, what are they saying?
We're getting such an incredibly positive response. We think we have a very good chance. In spite of the local and national polls, as I said before, when I speak to people, I've got people coming up to me saying, Dave, I've been a lifelong Conservative, or I've been a lifelong Liberal, but I'm voting NDP this time.
Because of the Dean Del Mastro
affair? That may have something to do with it. I think people are looking at Tom, and Tom has a really good impression on people. Mm-hmm. That's what we're finding, that people 3 or 4 months ago didn't really know him. Now that they're getting to know him, they really like him.
It's interesting, though, the Liberals, as you know, are trying to align the NDP somewhat with the Conservatives because of not running deficits but balancing the books. What's your reaction to that?
Well, the last time the Liberals balanced the books, they did it at the expense of our social programs. Mr. Martin made more cuts to health care and our social programs than any other Prime Minister. In fact, he boasted that the government expenditures compared to GDP were less than they had been in 1948 before we had health care. So my problem is, if Mr. Trudeau is going to run up deficits again, my fear is that he's going to use that as another excuse to attack our social programs. We're going to make the corporations pay their fair share because they're sitting on almost $1/3 of $1 trillion worth of dead money. And they're not investing in Canadians, so if they're not going to create jobs, we're going to make them pay their fair share, and that's just the way it is.
When some people in this community, no doubt, very concerned about jobs, would you say that's the #1 issue here?
It's a huge issue, along with the environment. But as I said, Mr. Harper has given us this false choice that we can either create jobs or protect the environment. We have the technology to do both. We just haven't had the political will. When, in 2008, when GM and Chrysler were threatening to take their ball and go home, I was listening to CBC Radio, and Leo Panich, who's a professor of political economy at York University, was saying, great, take your ball and go home, but you know what? The plants and all the machinery inside those plants are ours as Canadians. We've paid for them over and over with tax breaks, grants, so maybe we make cars. We've got the best workers in the world. Maybe we crank out solar panels. And if our governments gave citizens and businesses low or no interest loans, we could, and said you could put solar panels on every house. You could have rooftop wind turbines. You could re-insulate your home, put in windows, doors, ground source heat pumps. Communities could have ground source heat pumps. Think of the hundreds of thousands of Canadians we could put back to work and have a smaller footprint on the earth. Tom talked about that when he said we don't need more megawatts, we need negawatts. So if we all do a little bit and we make it affordable for Canadians to do that, and I believe we can put Canadians back to work, protect the environment, and Peterborough is a wonderful place. My dad came to play lacrosse and football here in the 1950s. He worked at GE, and in those days they had over 6,000 unionized employees. They have less than 600 today. Johnson & Johnson's gone, Pioneer Chainsaw's gone, OMC is gone, Westclocks are gone. All of those jobs, in GM in Oshawa in those days had over 25,000 employees. They're down to about 3,000 to 4,000 now. So we can put Canadians back to work. We will put Canadians back to work.
So hard to know how many jobs the community has lost over, let's say, the last decade, but any new jobs being created?
There are. Now, for example, the new Nordia call center opened less than a year ago downtown. There's more than 200 jobs there. Some of the reaction was a little bit mixed to that because some people said, gee, those aren't quite the kind of jobs we were looking for. We were looking for manufacturing jobs, well-paying jobs.
So who's selling on the job creation front? Is there any one party that stands out that's doing a good job of selling that, or what's been the community reaction to some of the debates that have already taken place?
Well, we did have a debate on that very specifically. It was the first debate. The NDP candidate talked a lot about family-supporting jobs and good-paying jobs, but I've yet to hear him roll out where he proposes that these will be created. I'm anxious to hear. He might have more of an opportunity to talk about that. The Liberal candidate talked a lot about training of young people and how the skilled trades will be the future of jobs in this town. And Mr. Skinner talked entrepreneurship. Being an entrepreneur himself, he seems to be an advocate of start your own business, start it small, grow it, be global with it. So who knows where they talked a lot about manufacturing and how that could have a resurgence here in Peterborough.
Can it?
I don't know. There was optimism, but I've yet to see how that can possibly take place. It might, maybe. I don't really know.
At the Peterborough GE plant, where so many jobs have disappeared, those who are still employed are thinking carefully about their vote. This man supported the NDP last election, and this time?
Right now it's a difficult choice. Gotta just kind of play it out and see how it goes. They're talking about the deficit, and Trudeau, I believe he's got a green plan on the agenda, and that would probably help us get out of deficit in a hurry, because that's a big economic swing for us. So it's, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to find out who goes into power again.
But some don't necessarily want power. The former Green Party candidate here was encouraging his supporters to vote NDP, all in an effort to prevent vote splitting. It sparked controversy with the local riding association, and soon after, that Green candidate resigned. Now Doug Mason has stepped in.
He had a good reason for asking for that change of support, and that reason is the anti-Harper vote. So many people in the country want to get rid of the Harper government. So I understand Gary wanting to do that. And in fact, early on in the conversation, I was in agreement with that. But then as I listened to more and more arguments that were coming from the membership, and also a great piece by Elizabeth May in the Tyee magazine where she gave some very convincing arguments why we're not actually splitting the vote. We're bringing more vote out into play rather than splitting them. So I did at first very much agree with Gary. I was ready to split the vote, but listening to other arguments, no, I changed my mind. We've got good reasons to stay as a Green Party. We send a very strong message to whoever does eventually win this riding. They will look back and see the vote split, and they will see how many people voted Green, and that will influence their thinking.
While some candidates are just hoping to make their mark, others, like the NDP, who haven't won here since the 1960s, are hoping to make history.
The sun will come up on the 20th regardless, but I'm hoping that I'll be on my way to Ottawa.
For CPAC in Peterborough-Kawartha, I'm Jacqueline Mulcharik.